Ladies and gentlemen, I would like now to introduce to our next moderator, Mr. Aleksandar Medjedovic, Executive Board Member of Turkish-German Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Berlin. Mr. Medjedovic, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jagoda. It is always a pleasure to be with you, and let me just say thank you for still holding the forum under the current circumstances. I guess any communication that we have is a success, and particularly, when it comes from the Tsomokos group, it is a big pleasure. When this started, I was wondering whether we will have a Belgrade Economic Summit or a Serbian Economic Summit, and if I knew one thing is that our dear friend Simeon will not be stopped, even not by the pandemic, and neither will his team. So thank you very much, and we all acknowledge the energy that it takes to be alive at this time. And without further ado, thank you for the introduction. I do not want to spend any time. I am completely irrelevant for this discussion. I don't want to spend any time introducing myself. And the country where I have most of my expertise, which is Turkey, was amply discussed in the panel before. And I'm glad that I don't have to talk about Turkey, because then we would still be here at 10 o'clock in the evening. So you will forgive me if I move away from myself and go straight into the panel, and we will be talking about stability factors in Southeast Europe. Now, of course, Southeast Europe is a Schlagwort, is a region that is a word that we're using a couple of times a day, politicians, journalists, scholars alike. But we don't even define, when we're using this word, we don't even define what we mean by Southeast Europe. Does it include the EU countries which are located in Southeastern Europe geographically, or do we exclude them? In what way do we exclude other players or include them? Do we include Turkey? So it is a very open topic, and it certainly deserves some discussion. And one player that we certainly underestimate in talking about Southeastern Europe is Greece. Greece is in the EU. Theoretically, they shouldn't even be there. If you allow me that little joke, they should be somewhere closer to Europe, but they are there where they are. And the Hellenic Republic is an extremely important player in the region. They are, if you want, we can say they are the gate of the EU to the east, to the real east, which starts after that. So Greece is very well represented in our panel today. I'm very happy about that. It is not for nothing that we say Greeks and Serbs are brothers, but I don't want to go more into that. That's what you hear when you're on vacation in Greece. And it's a great relationship that the two countries have, and it's a great impact that Greece has in the region, and a lot of expertise in foreign policy. And it is with that I'm welcoming our next keynote speaker with great pleasure. It's His Excellency Miltiades Varvitsiotis. He's the alternative Minister for Foreign Affairs, responsible for EU affairs of the Hellenic Republic from the Foreign Ministry. And if I might say, all the diplomats from Greece that I've encountered so far, and I know many of them, they're just great. So, sir, you're heading an excellent ministry, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on what can we do, what Greece can do, and also what everybody can do to make the region more stable. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your warm words, and thank you for this introduction. It's also a pleasure for me to be here with you today. With Simeos Tsomokos, we have organized 11 years ago one summit in Belgrade for the Greek-Serbian enterprises that went extremely well. At that time, I was responsible for the international economic affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as Vice Minister. Now I'm responsible for the European affairs. And I think that it's the time to talk about Europe. It's a time to talk about Europe because Europe is the solution to the security and safety problem in the Balkans. There is no other way that we can actually deal with what is well known in the Balkans. This is that the Balkans produce more history that they can consume. Tensions, nationalistic aspirations, distorted view of history, fragmented geography, all these contribute to an unstable patchwork. The last 30 years, we have seen several 30 years, we have seen several wars erupting in the Balkans, causing a lot of friction and a lot of problems. Nowadays, we are in another era. a policy that has been actually presented back in 2003 in Thessaloniki, and this was the enlargement process of EU to the Western Balkans. Now it's moving fast. And it's moving fast after last April's Council decision to open the talks with North Macedonia and Albania and refresh the interest of the talks with Montenegro and Serbia. And I think it's extremely important to move in this direction in a solid way. I think that the new enlargement process that we have adopted, it's much better than the previous one. If you remember, the previous one was consisting of chapters that they were opening, reviewing, closed, let's go to the next chapter. It was like a book. The new process is like put in circles, and you have circles by starting with a rule of law circle, and then expanding, covering all the areas of interest. And actually, the way that it has been formulated, this enlargement process, secures also the fact that there cannot be steps backwards from all the pieces of legislation that have been introduced. So whatever it is introduced, it should remain as such till the end of the process and the final accession to the European Union. Well, let me say a few things about how Greece is watching the Balkans, especially after a 10 years crisis. You know that this 10-year crisis has caused us to shrink the economy. The Greek economy has been shrunk by a quarter. The Greek banking system has passed through serious changes. It has been forced to sell all the subsidiaries in the Balkans, and it's actually has slowed down the whole economic crisis has slowed down what we were admiring at the late at the 90s and at the early 2000s, that we were one of the big investors in the Balkans. This is not anymore the case. But it is the case that Greece is coming back to the economic affairs. It's becoming itself a pole of attraction of investments in the region. There is an increased interest, especially from the other side of the Atlantic, to invest for the first time in the area. And this definitely will signalize that Greece is becoming the hub for a lot of investments that will affect also the well-being of our neighboring states in the Balkan region. Therefore, we have to increase our ties. We have to increase our ties in transportation. We have to increase our ties in political dialogue. And of course, we have to increase our ties in the business communities dialogue. And therefore, we are here to facilitate that. We have introduced several tools in order to succeed that. And we have actually put together a strategic plan that is going to welcome investors in Greece, but also welcome people who will live and try to manage a business all over the region from Greece. In order to move to that time, we have first of all to deal with what we are facing, and we are facing an extraordinary crisis, an unprecedented situation in terms of this pandemic. This pandemic has actually seized a lot of aspirations that we had for 2020 to be a very good year. And actually, the pandemic has put an extra stress and burden in the communication with our neighbors. Lately, we have seen the closure of borders and the double check of epidemiological data or certificates from passengers that they have passed the test of COVID. In order to safeguard what is now the issue in Greece, which is not to put an extra stress in our health system that is already stressed a lot, especially in Thessaloniki. But thank God, the news that they are coming from the medical level make us a little bit more optimistic for next year, and we hope that by spring that we can really operate and start business as usual. For that issue, we have dealt also in the framework of the Council of Europe, and I would like first of all to thank the Serbian authorities for facilitating the Greek chairmanship. I was the chairman until last week of the Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe, in which we have presented what we call the Athens Declaration, and this was a document that actually comprised all the values that we should and all the things that we should deal in order to have in order to deal with the pandemic in a way in conformity with the rule of law, democracy, and human rights, which is absolutely important. Because what we cannot let in this pandemic happen is, first of all, is a demise of the rule of law, human rights, and the democratic structures. And the second thing that we cannot accept is the vast circulation of the fake news about the pandemic that will make cause a new wave of populistic and ignorant leaderships that will not tolerate international cooperation. The other thing that we have put together is we have put together what is called the Observatory for History, for the teaching of history. As I told you in the beginning, we are producing more history that we can consume, and a lot of times the teaching of history in neighboring states that have a long history of fights and difficult situations between them actually is causing friction. And that's why we actually endorsed this idea coming from the French presidency, and we actually came to a conclusion on how to establish this observatory for the teaching of history in the framework of the Council of Europe. And this is going to be a very helpful tool in order to shorten out issues that are very difficult to shorten out at the bilateral level. How to teach the history of the First Balkan War, the Second Balkan War, the revolutions of independence, also the breakup of Yugoslavia. It's very difficult. So you need somebody from the outside to calm down. As you have mentioned, before getting into Turkey, because you opened the window for Turkey, and I don't want to go to consume all the time on Turkey, because probably most of the things that you know already, there are not new news on this front apart from the continuation of the Turkish aggressiveness. I would like first of all to tackle a thing that has surfaced lately again, and this is terrorism and hybrid threats. There is a need for increased cooperation to deal with these threats, and there is definitely the cooperation between the security authorities of all the Balkan states and Serbia with the European security agencies is going to be very much welcomed, since these threats actually pose a threat of not only to persons or countries, it's actually a threat our way of living, which is based on an open, free, and democratic societies that can accept the tolerance and can accept the differences among people. Let me close with the issues on Turkey. Well, let's face it, Turkey is moving far away from Europe. They're doing whatever it takes to disregard all the European Union Council's conclusions. Although in October, the European leaders have presented Turkey with two ways. The one way was a way of lowering the tensions, stopping the aggression, taking out their fleet and their survey vessels from the exclusive economic zone of Greece and Cyprus, stop the illegal drillings, and start refresh cooperation with the EU. Turkey has decided not to move along that path, and actually continues to do what actually irritates and creates problems in the southeastern Mediterranean. It has become apparent that the southeastern Mediterranean is the soft underbelly of European Union. And it has been apparent to the European leaders that there is no other way but to confront sometime with this Turkish behavior, since Turkey doesn't seem to be willing to work to start having a workable relations first with its neighbors and then with European Union. Thanos Dokos maybe will say a few more things on that, but I want to tell you that also the positioning of the different European Balkan countries vis-a-vis Turkey on this issue is going to be regarded by Athens as very closely. And this is because we don't believe that Turkey is a threat only to Greece. It's not only a threat to Greece. It's becoming an unstable player for Europe's interest in all southeastern Mediterranean, and it has been inflicted in all the difficult situations in the wider region, starting with Caucasus, with their intervention with Azerbaijan, moving to the Gulf with Qatar, moving to Africa with Somalia, going to the North Africa with Libya, and vis-a-vis Greece and Cyprus. I mean, this is way too much to be accepted, and to accept Turkey as the regional policeman who is willing to interfere in any war erupting in the wider region, and actually interfering not only politically, but also by means either supporting with arms, either sending warriors, either instrumentalizing ISIS or other extremists into moving into these areas. This is not a behavior of a country that actually wants to have a stable environment in which bilateral economic and political cooperation can flourish. And since we want in the Balkans to have a very stable environment, following what Greece has done all these years, and promoting dialogue, cooperation, and economic exchanges, I think that we cannot tolerate this behavior of Turkey. My final point, because I want to thank you for giving me the time. Well, with Serbia, we're sharing a lot of things together. And it's important to renew and to refresh our long-standing friendship, and to refresh our bilateral economic ties, and to refresh also our political ties. We are here to help the way of Belgrade to Brussels. We can be the facilitators in this to this end. And I think by working together and marching this path together, I think that we can generate one wider area of cooperation and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Miltiades Varvitsiotis, alternate minister of the Hellenic Republic. Thank you for sharing your views and giving us insights into so many subjects. As I said, Turkey is it's a very, very big and long subject, and you elaborated very deeply on it. Aside from all the politics, I just want to share a personal observation. Is whenever I see Turks and Greeks, I mean the people, the Turkish and the Greek people meeting each other, it's such a warm relationship, and the people on the street like each other so much that it's always striking me. For many, many years, for the last 20 years, I've been watching that in Greece and in Turkey. So let's hope that what the people on the street can achieve, obviously every day in liking each other and embracing each other, it can be one day achieved on the global scene. Sir, thank you very much. We know you're very busy. Thank you for being with us, and all our best regards to Athens, where I assume you are right now. Thank you. Thank you very much, our alternate minister from the Hellenic Republic. We are moving now straight into our panel discussion, and I would like to introduce our panel participants. It's a great pleasure, if I can say, a power panel of education, of educated people on the topic, on policy issues, and I'm very happy to chair it. We have Mrs. Tanja, the Deputy Secretary General of the Regional Cooperation Council. We have Mr. Ivan Vejvoda, Director of Europe's Futures Project and Permanent Fellow at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna. We do have Mr. Thanos Dokos, another Greek gentleman with us. He's the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister in Greece. And we have Dr. Marek Dabrowski, non-resident scholar at Bruegel in Brussels. Now, I would like to direct the first question to Mrs. Miscevic. You have been the chief negotiator for the Republic of Serbia with EU accession talks. What I would call a hell of a job, one of the most difficult in the region, certainly, knowing it also from personal experiences and talks with many of your colleagues. Can you give us a little European perspective? We talked now a lot with the assistant minister on the other side, on what's the region facing from the other side. Can you give us a little perspective? How is the EU? You've been there. You've been in Brussels for many, many times, deep inside. How is the EU seeing the region and what's going on?
It is, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Due to the health issues, the Secretary General, Mrs. Bruegel, was not able to join, but it gives me the opportunity to address yet another time, because very often, each and every year, I participated, as you said, as a chief negotiator, head of negotiating team in Serbia. Well, Aleksandar, I haven't been in Brussels since March, as you can imagine. But nothing has changed in terms of the acceptance and the support to the European integration of the Western Balkan six, as we call them. There is a very strong discussion going on. Let me remind you, it started with the call for the new methodology, with the internal discussion among the member states on how this new methodology should look like. How, as the alternative minister said, it's going to make the process as fast as it possible. As you can imagine, the process is very slow in terms of deliverable results for accessing towards the European Union. One side of the coin says this is because of the slow progress in rule of law in the countries that are negotiating, or bilateral issues. But the other side of the coin also the understanding of why process should be upgraded or faster in terms of reaching the institutional developments in terms of the cooperation between the candidate country and the European Union. But without question, Mark, there is a strong support coming from the EU member states. They differ in terms of their understanding what should be the support and how they could better support us. And let me finish, because I know that it will be much better to discuss the issues. I know that one point where there is no difference is the support to the regional cooperation, even reaching the regional integration level of the Western Balkan 6, which I am doing right now as being the Deputy Secretary General of the RCC, of which we can, of course, discuss further.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to direct the question on another topic to our guest from Vienna, Mr. Ivan Vejvoda, whom I hope I see now here. Is Ivan with us? If I may ask our technical friends. If not, we can return to him at a later point. Ivan, are you there? Seems not to be the case. I will return to you immediately after that, and I move on to our other panelist, Mr. Thanos Dokos, National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic. Now, again, let's go back to the EU perspective of the region, which is a question I can ask all of you, but maybe you are deep inside the EU because you are the EU. Is the EU seeing the region as stable? Or is there kind of a hopelessness saying, well, it will never be a factor of stability. It will always have to be something that we have on the leash and looking at them critically. Are we stable for them? Is there hope for that?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be in such good company, even digitally. Hopefully next year it will be a physical meeting. And I must say, I'm not the most objective analyst or observer to answer the question because Greece is part of the region. We have important stakes in the integration of the Western Balkans. But let me try to think from a European perspective.
Yes, there's unfinished business in the Balkans. It's not a powder keg of Europe, it's as it used to be for many years. It's much more stable today, but there is unfinished business. There are issues, problems that need to be addressed. And let me insist and echo what Minister Varvitsiotis said. The EU is the answer. I'm not blind to problems, and the EU has been faced with many internal and external issues in the past few years. Perhaps has lost a bit of its dynamism, but one should not underestimate the resilience of the EU. It's been a story of crisis. So far, all of them have been overcome successfully. So I think from an EU perspective, this is unfinished business. We need to move on with integration of the Balkans. Yes, there is concern in some countries that we are trying to integrate relatively unstable regions. But that's exactly why we need to move as fast as possible, because there's reasons for these countries to be unstable, and that causes problems to the EU as a whole. So if one looks at the EU security space, there's a big hole in the Western Balkans. So we need to move as fast as possible to close the gap.
You're mentioning important factors: time, concern about certain, as you call it, holes on the map or on the ground. It certainly doesn't help when players interfere in that process. And I'd like to direct the question to our guest, Dr. Marek Dabrowski, who has ample experience with Russia and with transatlantic issues as well. Dr. Dabrowski, first of all, I also don't see you on my list. Are you with us? Oh, yes, you are.
Yes, okay. I am.
That's great. That's great to hear and great to see you. Sir, you heard the question. There are certain problems on the ground, on the table. Everybody's trying to deal with it. Does it help if, President Trump invites to the White House and puts on, everybody will forgive me this characterization, a big show with actors, important actors of the region, and the same is being done in Beijing at next stage or in Moscow? Does that help? How do you put that in relation to the serious problems that need to be tackled on the ground?
First, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion. I must say I am an economic analyst and researcher, so I will concentrate mostly on this issue. Of course, I understand that contemporary politics sometimes requires the big shows, but big shows may be important, but maybe not be important, depending on how they will be followed up by respective parties. we live definitely in very difficult times, I mean pandemic, and the economic and political challenges are really very serious everywhere in Europe, in the world, but also in this region. And I deeply believe that the most important instrument and policy framework to put stability in the region is a successful continuation of the enlargement process. I was very happy to listen to address of the Minister of Greek government, who underline importance of this process and also reminded us that this process, in fact, already started 17 years ago in EU Thessaloniki summit. And this is quite a long time. And during this 17 years period, only one country of the region, Croatia, became the member of the EU. And I think it's time to speed up this process on both sides, on the EU side, incumbent member states, and in candidate countries. And both sides have a lot of things to do. On incumbent side, I think that it would be very good to stop using enlargement process as some kind of bargaining tool for short-term domestic political purposes, as we experienced several times in more distant and recent past. North Macedonia is probably the biggest victim of this process. It still becomes a victim because there are some question of neighboring country, this time related to historical some claims. So I think this is not definitely prospective policy, and this is not productive policy. But also I think on candidate countries have a lot, very large agenda of things which must be done and should be accelerated. This was mentioned, the problem of time. I also deeply believe that time is not playing in favor of candidates. If we look historically, each subsequent wave of candidates has more difficult and complex conditionality to meet. So postponing the process doesn't solve anything. A few years from now, it may be even more difficult. And what I mean in practice, we have this new framework, enlargement methodology. I don't have enough time to discuss whether it is better from the previous one or not. We just have this, and we must stick to this new methodology. And this means that candidate countries must accelerate both economic but also political reforms. If we look for various international rankings, like political ones like Freedom House or Bertelsmann Foundation, but also economic one like World Bank Doing Business or Heritage Foundation Index of Economic Freedom, the region doesn't perform well. It's basically, we can say, it's either stagnation or even backtracking on some point. So here it must be acceleration, especially on rule of law, on this very basic problem. And second thing, which is equally important, is solving intra-regional problems, which we also know is a long list of this. Mm-hmm. And here, I can imagine that what I will say now may not sound popular, especially in the Republic of Serbia, but I think that Serbia exactly has a key role here to play to resolve this remaining conflict, especially its relation with Kosovo. And I cannot imagine successful completion of the EU enlargement process without solving this problem. Thank you very much.
Definitely a lot of baggage. I will return to the economic point, because as you say correctly, you're covering economy, and that's a very, very important point. I will return to that to all participants now. I just want to welcome Ivan Vejvoda, the director of Europe's Futures Project and permanent fellow at the Institute of Human Science in Vienna. Ivan, we've been talking about the stability. you're dealing with human sciences in the institute, and I'd like to know from you, or I'd like to get a perspective. We're talking about stability, but from outside. But how do you feel? And you are also from the region originally. How do you feel? Is the region seeing itself? Is the self-characterization of an average Serbian or Bosnian or Kosovar? Yes, we want that stability. We are at the point where it should anchor to. Or is it a rather leave us alone mentality? You know, don't take out all of your problems on us here. How is the average citizen seeing the stability factor?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And it's great to be with old friends and partners in crime, if I can put it, on these issues. A lot has been said, and Marek in particular, I think, has said some key points, as well as Thanos and Tanja. I think, first of all, that we need to repeat that the greatest number of citizens very simply have common sense. And they know that it's a little better, a little more certain, a little more prosperous to be a member of a bigger club than to stay outside it. And that's why in the region we have what I would call healthy majorities for entry into the European Union. And of course, then depending on the day and the event that has happened, that goes up or down around the 50% mark as far as Tanja's and my country, Serbia, is concerned. And that's why, as others have said, we need to push from both sides. I would say we need to push more from ourselves, from the candidate countries, to do the hard work of reform. First of all, political, rule of law, judiciary independence, and of course, strengthening democratic institutions. I think that is the key backbone of the stability factor, which is the theme of this panel. If we're not endeavoring in that direction, we will not have stability. And then, of course, I think people realize also, whatever they say in public opinions, that they know that the unresolved issues have to be resolved. And in our case, Serbia and Kosovo, do we want to be a country which, for example, like between India and Pakistan, has 70 years of an unresolved Kashmir? Or look what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. It can blow up in your face if you're not working diligently to try and find that very difficult middle ground. And let me also say that I was heartened to hear Minister Varvitsiotis about the Observatory for Teaching History. Now, I'm sure the minister knows, and some of us who have been dealing with all this initiative goes far back to the early 2000s, which was the joint history project initiated in Thessaloniki at the Center for Democracy and Reconciliation of Southeastern Europe, where a number of people led the charge, the precedent to the Regional Cooperation Council, the Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe, interesting title with regard to the panel that we're having, that launched, putting together all historians that looked at the history teaching in, especially in high schools, and have produced a mountain of work, working very concretely with the teachers. So I'm glad to hear that this is continuing, because confronting the past is another foundational element of stability. If we do not address the crimes that were committed in our name by our various countries or leaderships, we will not have that basis for the stability that is needed.
I would like to, thank you very much, Ivan. I would like to return to the economy, because on many, many points we say, let the economy be good, let foreign direct investment come in, let factory opens, give people work, increase the new employment numbers, and all will be fine. Is the economy a magical formula for solving any problem of stability, or is there more than that? I'd like to address the question to all of you, and let's make a final round before the end of the panel. Tanja, in your talks in Brussels, is it only economy, or is there more to that?
No, definitely not only economy, but economy is one of the issues, as you heard Ambassador Pina, one of the priorities both for the EU and the presidency is going to be more economic and resilient Europe. That's the same for the region. I will just add to what Ivan said. More than 70% people in our region, Western Balkan, speaks highly about regional cooperation and even integration. In what respect? In respect of so-called four freedoms, so freedom of goods across the border without more problems that is necessary to reach the goods from one side of the region to another one. But not only goods, people are interested also in free movement of people. That means mutual recognition of qualification, of certificates and diplomas for us to reach one of each other labor market and to fill the gaps of the people that left left the region, which is one additional issue to deal with. So the so-called brain drain or moving especially young people from around the region, but also services and issues as more digital into our economies, as we are faced now to deal with a digital conference instead of sitting and discussing all of us in Belgrade. Then the investment issue, how to align investment criteria for attracting the investors, not only foreign investors, but also internal investors, potentials that are in the region, domestic investors as such. So all of those issues, and one that is that we just start working with from Sofia Summit is the common regional market. Of course, not as something which will replace the European integration of each and every of the Western Balkan countries. Quite contrary, it will contribute to the speed, especially economic recovery and also resilience. I would also use the word resilience within the region. And the latest thing, traveling with IDs around the region is something which is also needed both economically but also mentally. It will mean a lot to confirm the need for the regional cooperation.
And then the so-called small Schengen, which the prime ministers...
I would prefer to call this common regional market as it is right now.
All power to you, since it's the region, it's not the Schengen. I'd like to direct the question to Mr. Dokos. You mentioned that Greek banks had to pull out of Serbia due to the domestic difficulties. Is Serbia still attractive for Greek investors, or from your perspective, what would you like to happen to have some more stable FDI coming in?
Well, yes, Serbia has always been important and still is. I understand the temptation to try to keep its feet on two boats. Eventually, however, I think Serbia will have to make its strategic choice. And in my mind, of course, that will be up to the Serbian people to decide. But I think the EU remains, despite its problems and shortcomings, remains the most attractive option. More stability, well, you know what they say, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I'm a security expert, and that's my portfolio. So I would like to emphasize the need for political stability in order to attract FDI, but also physical security. And it's not, of course, Serbia that is at the heart of the security problems of the Western Balkans. But if one looks at the region, in some cases, it's the source of problems like returning foreign fighters or transnational organized crime. In other cases, the Western Balkans are important because they are lucky in the case of energy to be a transit region, or unlucky in the case of migration or refugee flows to be again a transit region. So for all those reasons, it's important that both the countries themselves make an extra effort, and the EU makes an investment in their resilience and stability. And I think both sides should work together to achieve that common interest and objective.
Exactly. And if I might pass on the question to Dr. Dabrowski, Mr. Dokos mentioned transit is a site with two medal. Being in the middle of everything can have lots of advantages, but also lots of disadvantages and problematic point. And Serbia has been in the refugee crisis without having any responsibility in it. They are just there, and all the other Balkan countries as well, to their credit. How do you see the future of that evolving? How will the region come out? Will it keep its strong economic attractiveness? Will it keep its problems? What will be the major KPI, if we can say so, from the region for stability?
If we speak about FDI, I think the three factors are very important. First, what was already mentioned by previous speakers is political stability and security. Second is economic. It's expectation regarding market. Different expectation, investors understand that this is only domestic market. Another is that it can work for regional market or for the entire EU. Serbian economy is not so large economy as Chinese economy or Indian economy or Russian economy. So basically, if there is no this external perspective that investor which will set its business in Serbia will have also perspective of interrupted operation neighboring countries and for the entire EU. This is makes investment much more attractive. And third thing, which is also important, is again, even being economist, I return to political institutional issue. It's rule of law, independence of judiciary power is also extremely important for investors. And definitely, I think what was mentioned by many of you about transitory role of the Western Balkans region, this is obvious if not anybody looks for map. I think that it may be a big advantage, especially that it's natural bridge between countries, EU countries of Southeastern Europe like Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and countries of Central and Western Europe. So this is another advantage of speeding up accession process, and also this is source of potential economic advantage benefits. Of course, there are always costs, but these costs are already now in several of you mentioned refugee flows or undocumented migration or some problem of international crime. But I think that this problem will have to be tackled anyway. And it would be much better to in a close cooperation with direct neighbors and also with the entire EU.
Pan-European cooperation, as I understand. I have one last question for Ivan, from Mr. Ivan Vejvoda. Let's stay on the human side, on the people. Internal factors of stability. What if you were to give an advice to the leaders, what are the factors that they have to promote more heavily to their own citizens rather than always advertising outside of their country? What do we need to tell to the citizens of Albania, Bosnia, or Macedonia, North Macedonia to work on in their own stability zone?
Well, obviously, it's predictability of everyday life, which means jobs that provide a decent wage for families and possibly 1 or 2 holidays a year. It's the mantra that people use about the European Union. It's about protection and opportunity, and the same goes for any country. If the citizens feel they're protected and they have an opportunity for a decent life, they will, feel that there is stability. But unfortunately, as others have mentioned, we have a big demographic problem in the whole region, not only the Western Balkans, with people seeking other places where that stability, at least perceived stability, exists. And so we have a depleting of the population, thus a need for new labor. In Serbia today, we have Turkish construction workers from India even, And that simply means that there are not enough people to work, as are doctors and nurses. My electrician from Belgrade went to Germany because he's going to earn 5 times more there. So that is something that is indeed needed. And I think we're sort of singing from the same hymn sheet here. We're agreeing that, yes, economic performance is extremely important, but if we don't have political stability, we won't get that economic performance that we wish and the investments that are needed, however clever we are in attracting foreign investors. And let me say that the whatever we call it, the regional market or the catchword of mini Schengen, which is a wrong one, is indeed, I would say, an initiative from below, from the countries who need to show more of an initiative that they want to espouse all the European values. And in that sense, each of the countries needs to reach out to each other, and we need to be each other's champions much more than we were. And final word, I think the European Union, and this is something that many of us have been saying for at least 20 years, bring us into various levels of EU activity even before we become members. And the migration crisis was a perfect example of that, where the countries of the Western Balkans had to sit at the high European Union table for the crisis to be resolved. And in that regard, minimum, let's start with bringing these countries into the big Future of Europe conference.
Tanja, gentlemen, you're very lucky now, because my last question was, will Serbia and the other countries will be in the EU 2025? But we don't have time to answer it. So I joke aside, I know that's a very difficult question, and I don't want to impose on any of you to answer it. And I see Simeon, because he's the next moderator, already waiting in line and waiting for us to finish. But I think the question, will we make it? Will the region make it? Will the countries that are candidates right now, that are heavily negotiating, will they make it by 2025? I only need one answer. Whoever was wanting to answer this, will 2025 be a D date? No answers. No answer is also an answer. I could say, but I don't do that, and I think it's more fair to leave that to a further discussion and to more science. I've been incredibly humbled by the science power that we had here. Thank you very much, Tanja Miscevic, Thanos, Dokos, Dr. Marek Dabrowski, and Vejvoda. I feel humble on this panel because the science that is surrounded here, I will not reach in my still yet young life. I will not reach it so far. Thank you very much, and I invite everybody to stay online and to go into the next panel with our dear friend Simeon Tsomokos and a gentleman called Peter Grk, Secretary General of Bled Strategic Forum. And by just speaking Serbian or the Balkanic languages, everybody knows that Mr. Grk, what it means, Grk, it means Greek, and he probably is placed on the wrong panel. He should have been on our panel. So we invite everybody to stay on and to listen to Mr. Grk and Simeon. Thank you very much.